Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. DICE LA has released a summer patch for Battlefield 4, which includes quite a few fixes, changes and new features, as well as one new map that offers an entirely new experience. So on the fixes side, the developers got rid of an ancient issue that even Bad Company games were suffering from: the fake reload, where you would see the reload animation but your ammo count would not change. This issue has now finally been fixed, which every Battlefield player will surely be happy to hear. Also very important are the exploits that the developers got rid of in this patch, like this one here, where you would only expose a very small part of your head to the other players, while you were able to shoot them without any issue. Then they fixed an issue where players would randomly take damage or even die from walking on a staircase or slanting objects, as well as an issue that would cause you to take damage when vaulting over objects. Then the in-combat system also received two changes. The developers fixed an issue where the players could be able to join on a squad mate who was under fire, and they also removed the suppression active check, which means that the in-combat state is now only triggered when the suppression of a player is increasing, rather than being active until the suppression value reached 0 again. The soldier movement also received a few updates to fix an animation issue of the player's legs when the player was moving in a very specific way, and the soldier movement was also slowed down a bit to make the sidestep animation look more fluid. Then we have two big new features that have been added in this patch. One is the new skill-based team balancer that is enabled per default. What it will do is take both the team's sizes and skill into consideration, and then rebuild the teams based on their skill after every round. It will try to keep the squads and friends together while at the same time preventing excessive team stacking. Players who join during the round will be assigned to a team based on their skill, and it will evaluate manual team switching on a case-by-case basis. This means that it might refuse team switching in a case where it would ruin the balance of the server. So this feature sounds really good, and in theory it could finally provide us with more balanced matches on public servers. Now we just have to wait and see if it actually works as it is intended to. The second big new feature is called audio obstruction, which creates a much more realistic soundscape. This system takes into account which objects are between you and the source of the sound. This means that players who are above you or even on the other side of a building will now sound like there's actually a building between you and them. A change that admins of unranked servers will be very happy to hear about is that when you use the All Unlocks option for your server, then this will now finally unlock all weapons and attachments, even the premium ones. Then there are a bunch of changes that affect vehicles, where some of them, like the turret logic, had to be done to allow tick rates higher than 30. So on all platforms you will now find a vehicle sensitivity slider, and you might have to adjust that slider to get it to feel like it did before the patch, or maybe even a bit better than it did before. The developers also fixed an issue with the free look cameras in the vehicles, where a sudden frame rate decrease could significantly slow down the movement of the camera. Then there was a big change done for the chat physics that will surely again cause heated discussions. DICE LA reverted the chat physics back again to the original setup, which means that the 3-1-3 minigame is back into the game. They also fixed an issue where the mobility hits would cause a stall from which you could not recover again, as well as an issue where the mobility hit would flip you upside down. And the JDAM received a new explosion effect. The aircraft interior glass also received some love from the art department, which unified the reflection, brightness, glass color and opacity across the board, and the reflection brightness has been greatly reduced, which improves the visibility. Then there have been several changes done to how the thermal and night vision optics work, as well as how vehicles show up when you use them. These changes have primarily been done because of the night maps, and it appears that there is still some controversy to these changes. Speaking about night maps, all vehicles have head and interior lights on the Zavod Graveyard Shift map, but you are sadly not able to turn the headlights on and off to make a stealthy approach on the objective. Then the attack helicopter smart rockets got their rate of fire reduced from 300 to 200, and their turning angle was reduced from 30 to 10, which means that they are now less powerful against moving objects. The mobile anti-air also received some changes, as it got its overheat ratios adjusted so that they should now be more balanced between the 20mm and the 30mm guns. Here it has to be noted that the 20mm has better range and is easier to use thanks to its faster bullets, while the 30mm has more consistent damage as it has less spread. Lock-on missiles also received changes in order to make countermeasures more effective and consistent. The developers tried to achieve that by reducing the turn rates to stop missiles from doing instant 180-degree turns. They also reduced the time it takes to activate the guidance system in most missiles. The blast radius has been tweaked up to reduce the dusting, and the damage type has been changed from blast damage to impact damage. This means that if you use IR smoke in a tank and this causes that the missile impacts close to your tank, then this will no longer result in nearly receiving the maximum amount of the damage of that missile, as the damage type no longer uses blast damage now. Besides the lock-on missiles, the TV missiles also received some changes. They got their blast radius increased from 1.5 to 3 meters, and the soldier damage multiplier was increased to allow the TV missile to actually kill infantry. The developers also put some work into the responsiveness and the steering of the TV missile, but you have to try it out yourself to see if you actually like the new system. And lastly, the Superman bug has been fixed, which caused that players would get stuck in mid-air when exiting the attack helicopter or attack boat after firing a TV missile. So that's it for the vehicles, but we are not at the end of the changelog yet. Infantry players will be happy to hear that the tracer frequency of all full auto weapons has been reduced from every single round being a tracer to every third round being a tracer, which is also now closer to real life. The thickness and brightness has also been tweaked to make them less intrusive. Then the designers changed the flashbangs quite a bit. The effective angle is now 145 degrees. The suppression effect caused by flashbang explosions has been increased, and the flash duration for friendlies has been reduced to 0.6 seconds. They no longer blind dead people or shielded players in vehicles like tank drivers. The designers also reduced the amount of flashbangs that you can carry from 3 to 2. And the time to live for the flashbang has been reduced from 10 seconds to 1.5 seconds. This has been done to prevent players from dropping flashbangs of tall buildings at enemies below them. Generally speaking, I like the flashbangs after this patch, except for this here. I'm really not a fan of the flashbang being able to blind me in bright daylight. They should still have an effect, but it should be greatly toned down compared to when you use them in dark places. Moving on with the changes, the S-RAW has received a range and top speed increase in this patch. We now have to see how that one will turn out. Fans of the AN94 will also be happy to hear that the bipod has been brought back and unlocked per default, and the Mayor's Lag can now be equipped with a heavy barrel, which will reduce the spread from 0.2 to 0.1. There were several smaller changes done to the weapons, where the most noteworthy in my opinion is the decreased headshot multiplier for the revolvers, slugs and the Desert Eagle. This prevents the pump-action slugs from being able to one-hit kill at infinite range, while still keeping the Mayor's Lag a one-hit kill with a headshot at ranges below 30 meters. And as part of the head glitching fixes, the designers lowered the projectile spawning location of the M26 variants to be closer to the barrel. As we now slowly approach the end of the changelog, it's time to look at the Gunmaster game mode, which also received a few changes in the summer patch. The designers fixed an issue where detention music would remain active after a player who reached the highest level left the server. Another issue should be fixed where the stats wouldn't get tracked properly, and a really nasty issue where using the gun emplacements could crash the entire server should also be fixed now. The designers also added the live scoreboard functionality and updated the head-up display to display an infinite amount of magazines. So that is quite a solid amount of changes that has been introduced in the summer patch, but the biggest changes were done to the networking of the game. The developers updated the server stall detection to be able to better track how servers are performing. They improved how the clients handle packet loss, as well as how the server and the clients handle rubber banding. Then the frame history time variable has been changed back to 1 again, in order to prevent dusting on fast-moving vehicles, like in dogfights with jets. The reason why this value was lowered before was to help with the taking damage behind cover issue, but a side effect of this change was that it caused more dusting for fast-moving vehicles just like jets in dogfights. What we will ultimately need are two different values, one for vehicles and one for infantry. On a PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, the game will now also send damage at the same rate as your frame rate. So even if the game is running at a simulation or tick rate of 30 Hz, the information about players that you hit will be sent to the server at the same rate as your frame rate. So if you play at 120 frames per second, that means 120 Hz, which does reduce the delay when sending damage to the server. But the biggest change and feature of the summer patch is the support for simulation or tick rates higher than 30 Hz. This means that technically the game is now able to run and update at any rate. So even 144 Hz is possible now, but you cannot play at such high rates yet. During the next weeks, the game server providers will test what kind of rates they are able to offer to the server admins on the PC. Once these tests are finished, the providers will start to share how admins can enable tick rates higher than 30 Hz on their servers. This means that the default tick rate of Battlefield 4 after the summer patch is still 30 Hz on all platforms, and the high tick rates are an extra for the server admins on the PC. But DICE is looking into increasing the default tick rate on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 above 30 Hz, so that they can eventually provide something like 45 or 50 Hz. You have to keep in mind that both Sony and Microsoft have limits in place for how much bandwidth a game is allowed to use. And when you increase the tick rates, then you also increase the update rates, and that means that you significantly increase the bandwidth requirements. Also, the developers always try to max out the console hardware as much as possible when the game is released, so there's not that much power left there. And the Xbox One as well as the PlayStation 4 already struggle to maintain a 60 frames per second at all times. So it's not that easy to offer higher tick rates there as it is on the PC. More details will follow during the next weeks on how the high tick rate servers will be handled and how the admins of Battlefield 4 game servers on the PC can get access to that feature. For you as a player, it will be very easy to find out which tick rate a server uses, as the game displays that information now in both the loading screen and the deploy screen, as well as in the network graph. I hope that we will also get a filter option inside of the server browser, so that I can filter out all the 30 Hz servers. We also got a couple of new performance indicators in this patch, which give you important information about your connection to the server. I have explained these icons in one of my previous videos in detail, the link is in the description. I'm currently working on an in-depth video that will explain how the netcode works now after the summer patch, as all the changes that have been done since the last winter patch did change it quite significantly, so I hope that I will have that one out soon. At the beginning of this video I said that in the summer patch we did not only get fixes, changes and new features, but also new content that will allow players to experience Battlefield like most of them have never experienced it before. This year in November it will be 10 years since DICE released the Battlefield 2 Special Forces add-on. And since that date they never released a night map again that actually took place at night. With Zavod Graveyard Shift, night maps are now introduced to the Frostbite engine era of the franchise. And the work that the developers and the designers at DICE have put into this map really pays off. But if you want to get the full experience, then you really have to play this map on a classic server. As otherwise the 3D spotting will completely destroy the setting and you will just be firing below the triangles. So if you are not afraid of the dark, then you have to play this on a classic server. Zavod Graveyard Shift is available in Conquest Large, Conquest Small, Domination, Obliteration, Rush, Team Deathmatch and Gunmaster. Now, this is the point where I have my usual outro, but today I want to take a moment and talk about what happened to me and my family recently. On the 4th of August, my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law were on their way home from their vacation in Croatia. They had a really awesome time there again, the weather was nice and so they were in no big hurry to drive home. But their journey was stopped by a bus driver who looked in the wrong direction when he turned. Even with literally hundreds of thousands of kilometers of experience, George was not able to avoid the accident. He was not speeding, he was not driving reckless, he was at the wrong spot at the wrong time. My sister-in-law barely survived the accident, while George sadly passed away. So why am I telling you all this? If something like that happened to someone close to you, then it makes you realize that our time on this earth is indeed limited, and no one of us knows how much time he has left. One of the many things that I learned from George was that you have to make the most out of the time that you have on this earth. But I'm not talking about earning a lot of money or being super successful at work. What I mean is to spend most of the time doing the things that you love, to spend time with your family and your friends, to enjoy your life and to not waste time fighting over silly things with the people who are very close to you. Life is short, so let's go live it.